Hello and welcome back. You may remember that we're in the middle of a chapter, and in the last chapter, Jack and Praiseworthy were digging up all the gold out of their claim, and they got a whole bunch, and now they are heading back to Hangtown. They need to be there for the 15th of August because Praiseworthy has promised that he's been challenged to a fight against the mountain ox. And as we know, Praiseworthy is a man of his word. So he's going to go back and fight the mountain ox. And then I suppose they're going to get on a ship and head back to Boston now that they have totally struck it rich. So here we go, middle of the chapter. They reached Hangtown late in the afternoon. The main street was hung with bunting as if it were the 4th of July. The place swarmed with miners, horses, mules, and burros. It looked to Jack as if every man and animal in the diggings had come to town. When Praiseworthy stepped out of the stagecoach, a shout went up. "There he is! It's Bullwhip himself!" Pitchpine Billy rushed over with his ears bent under the weight of his hat. "It's 'bout time," he spit. "The boys was grumbling you run out on the match. Not that they blame you. Howdy, Jamocha Jack." "Howdy, Pitchpine Billy." In another moment, Jimmy from town had crowded around, and Buffalo John and Quartz Jackson. "You'll have to excuse the missus," Quartz Jackson said. "She doesn't want to watch." "Let's get on with it," said Pitchpine Billy. "Where's the mountain ox?" "Eating oysters over at the Chinese Chow Chow," someone answered. "He got hungry waiting around." "Somebody fetch him. Boys, spread out." The miners formed a large circle in the center of the street. Others climbed on the roofs of the stores for a better view. When the mountain ox appeared at the doorway of the Chinese restaurant, Jack's heart dropped to his boots. The man from Grizzly Flats grinned. He had a neck like the stump of a tree. There was oyster juice in his beard. His chest looked as big around as a flour barrel. "He is a large gent at that," said Praiseworthy, studying his opponent. He handed Jack his revolver together with the buckskin pouches tucked under his belt and weighted down his pockets. "I wish we never came back here," Jack muttered. It's not a fair match. No, sir." "You want me to back out?" Jack took a breath and shook his head. "You gave your word. You have to stick by it." "That's all right. And anyway, I intend to beat him." Praiseworthy stripped off his shirt. The mountain ox across the way did the same. He was hairy as a grizzly bear and looked twice as big. Jonas T. Fletcher, the undertaker, stood in the clearings. "You two gladiators ready?" Praiseworthy nodded. The mountain ox wiped the juice from his beard. He grinned and turned to someone and said, "Ah, Lee, go fry me up about 24 more oysters. I'll be there in a minute, as soon as I whip this bullwhip fella." "Come on, fightin'. Oh, come out fightin'," said the town undertaker. "If either of you gets killed, I'll give him a free funeral job. May the best man survive." The undertaker scurried out of the clearing. Praiseworthy stepped forward, striking a pose with his fists. "Elbows in," he told himself. The mountain ox came out with his arms spread like the wings of a buzzard. Oh dear. The crowd stood tense. Squirts of chewing tobacco raised silent puffs of dust. Jack's heart was pounding in his ears. The gladiators closed the distance between them, and the pride of Grizzly Flats wasted no time. He swung an arm with enough power to bust through a barn door. When it had run its course, the crowd was astonished to see Praiseworthy still standing. He had felt nothing more than the wind. He had ducked with the greatest of ease. The street brawler, with his wide-open stance, signaled his punches in advance. Immediately, Praiseworthy countered with a left jab. It didn't amount to much, but it surprised the mountain ox. Jack gazed toward the center of the clearing with a leap of hope. In the afternoon heat, Praiseworthy's back glistened with sweat. The new muscles along his arms and shoulders looked polished. Almost 2 months in the diggings, swinging a pick from morning till night, had had their effect. He had the power to bust through a barn door himself. Come on, Ox, finish him off. Don't be scared of him, Bullwhip. Again, the mountain ox swung, and again, Praiseworthy escaped with nothing more than windburn. He was getting the hang of it. He was vigilant. He concentrated. He knew that one misstep, one miscalculation, and the mountain ox would end the match with a single blow. 5 minutes passed. To Jack, it was 5 hours, 5 days. The mountain ox swung one haymaker, that's like a big punch, after the other, but Praiseworthy dodged, ducked, and stepped aside. He cut a tall, lithe figure in the afternoon dust. Having by now made a thorough study of his opponent, as the book advised, Praiseworthy devised his attack. Left jab, he told himself. Keep them coming like bee stings. To the proboscis, the mountain ox may be all muscle, but a nose is a nose. The crowd, in growing amazement, watched and chewed tobacco and squirted juice. Not only was Praiseworthy still on his feet, he hadn't been touched. The oysters in the Chinese restaurant burned to a crisp. Praiseworthy kept jabbing with his left, and the mountain ox's nose turned as round and red as a tomato. Once, when the gladiators had worked themselves to the very edge of the crowd, the mountain ox let fly a carefully aimed wallop. Just as carefully, Praiseworthy ducked, and the blow collided with Cheap John, the auctioneer. He went flying backwards, knocking down 6 miners like so many dominoes. The bout continued without let-up, and the sun began to set through the pines. Praiseworthy had hardly exerted himself. He would duck, dispatch a left jab, and then resume his stance he remembered so well from the gentleman's book of boxing. But the mountain ox had been swinging his arms like a windmill, and now his tongue was very nearly hanging out. His brawler's arms, once so wide, he now seemed to drag at his sides. But like a wounded animal, he was still dangerous. Still, it seemed to Praiseworthy, the time had come to close the book. Big as was the pride of Grizzly Flats, he had a jaw like all other men, and a jaw was a jaw. A final bee sting. The mountain ox shook his head and stuck out his jaw in fury. Praiseworthy stepped in with a right cross from the shoulder, exactly as the book had advised, and it felt to him as if he were hitting a barn door. Jack held his breath. The mountain ox was still on his feet 5 seconds later. But then, he keeled over backwards like a statue and lay spread eagle in the dust. A roar burst from the crowd, and Pitchpine Billy rushed in to hold up Praiseworthy's arm. The winner! I don't know how he done it, but you saw it. The fair name of Hangtown has been saved. Boys, let's celebrate. Praiseworthy pulled on his shirt, and Jack handed him his revolver. He stuck it in his belt. The miners were raising noise all around them, but the two partners regarded each other, exchanging a silence. Finally, Praiseworthy said, "How was that, Jack? I backed up my reputation fair and square, didn't I?" Jack's face glowed as if he had swallowed a lantern. He was bursting with pride. There wasn't a man in the diggings he'd rather have for a partner. Not Pitch Pine Billy or Quartz Jackson or Jimmy from Town or Buffalo John. It wasn't a fair match, no sir, Jack grinned. The mountain ox can hardly read and write. Why, he doesn't know B from a bull's foot. And that is the end of the chapter. And the last chapter is coming up. Chapter 18, the arrival at, oops, I don't want to show you that, at the Long Wharf. One chapter left. And until then, oh, my hair, crazy. I will see you next time.